Welcome back, everyone. We are officially through the first weekend of the Major League Baseball season. Appreciate everyone who tuned into Sunday Night Spaces last night, breaking down the Phillies and the Rangers game and just talking some baseball things that we took away from the first few days of the season. We're going to try to do that every Sunday night. I have some coaching stuff throughout the year, so we might have to work around that. But on Mondays, hoping to bring you every single week our State of the Sandlot. We're going to call it basically our weekly thoughts in baseball from around the league. Going to bring out some different guests to the channel and expose you guys to a lot of different thought processes and information that will hopefully help you appreciate the baseball season, learn throughout the baseball season, and if you're betting on baseball, hopefully make a little bit of money throughout the baseball season. This week, bringing back Gio, who did a lot of our MLB preseason pieces with this. Just going to bring him on right now. Welcome back, Gio. Appreciate you taking some time. Looks like you're actually in a home this week, not in a hotel.
That's exactly right. Not in a hotel this time. How's it going, Commish? You have a good opening day? I imagine you did with being a Guardians fan.
Yeah, I mean, good opening weekend for my team. Also good for my pockets. I don't know how long they're gonna keep letting us take advantage of the stolen base market. I'm waiting to see those odds just get slashed like crazy. But it's been a very, very fun and very, 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 very profitable first few days to the season.
Yeah, doesn't it feel that way? Like I've been like batter props and pitching props will drop around like 11:30 at night, and I'm like, okay, all right. So batter props, and I go down to try to see stolen bases, and there's nothing for stolen bases, and I'm like, today's gonna be the day. Today's gonna be the day where like DraftKings just doesn't offer it anymore.
Yeah, they're getting to that point. They didn't offer anything on Trey Turner last night in the Phillies game. We only had JT Realmuto.
Yeah.
They're not offering.
They're getting really particular.
They're getting very particular. You're starting to see a little bit of market discrepancy between books like MGM and books like DraftKings not offering all types of players. Some are giving you better prices than others. Some are adjusting a little bit quicker. FanDuel has quickly become one of the most unusable sports books on the market. I highly recommend, if you're betting on sports, you have at least one other book beyond FanDuel, because FanDuel has increased their hold percentage and they're just not offering all of the different markets that they have in the past. I've made almost every single one of my baseball bets on non-FanDuel platforms so far this year.
I agree. I've been using DraftKings a lot. Like DraftKings has had a lot of good information, a lot of actual like good plays that I can actually find value in. FanDuel is just like a barren wasteland. There've been a couple times. I will say this: there have been a couple times where I found game lines a little bit more friendly on FanDuel. So like, Baltimore is plus 102 on DraftKings, but on FanDuel it's at like plus 120. So I would say to people, like, if you're looking about betting maybe a game, just go over to FanDuel and just double check yourself. You might have better odds on that, but that's the only thing I would say.
Yep, I completely agree. Sides and totals, the major markets.
Yeah, I would
fine,
go over
but all the niche markets, they are becoming unusable, in my opinion.
Yeah. I run into that with Toronto and St. Louis the other day, where like it was minus 110 on DraftKings, but they had St. Louis as like a plus 120 underdog. So like it was pretty drastic difference. So I would just double check.
Especially early in the night, those books, a lot of them will try to copy lines off of each other. And sometimes one book will drop a line and not realize that there's a major discrepancy compared to another book. So especially if you're betting like late at night before you go to bed, definitely line shop, like Gio said. But man, let's jump into it. This has been one of the most fun first few days of a season that I can remember. I know I'm not 75 years old. I don't have a whole history book here of experiences on opening weekend, but the new rule changes. We have a restricted shift now. We have a pitch clock. We have larger bases. I want to know your reaction to this. I know there's been a lot of visceral reactions on the internet. I hear hot topic of conversation on broadcast. I want to know your thoughts and what you've made of the first few days of seeing everything actually in action in regular season so far.
Yeah, I think there have been a lot of like ups and downs. So, ups, stolen bases. Like, it's making the game more exciting. It's a facet of the game that I think was lost for a long time, especially with the dawn of analytics. A lot of people don't want to get thrown out at second base, like with that mentality kind of deal. So I'm glad to see that kind of resurgence. I think that rule has worked. We're going to talk about the umpires a little bit. I think the umpires, this new class that they've brought in, 10 umpires who are coming up. I think has made a significant difference. I've loved it all, honestly. Like I really think that, it was weird to sit down for an opening day Yankee game and it not to be 3 hours long. Like I was through it in like 2.5 hours. I was like, oh, all right. Like this is something it's more digestible truly. And, that was the debate that was happening. A lot of like old school baseball guys were like, it's going to make a little bit of a difference. But I can tell you, like, when I sit down to watch a football game, like I have a very good idea when that football game is going to end. Like I can block that time out in my day. And a baseball game, unfortunately, even though I love watching baseball, there are times where I have no idea when this game is going to end. It might be 3 hours, might be 3.5 hours for a regular game. And the fact that now we're seeing that drastic difference kind of play out, I think the MLB was smart for doing that. I think 30 minutes is not a small deal. And I think too many old school baseball guys are trying to make it into a big deal when it's really not. So I think those are some of my takeaways. I love it. And the shift, also love it. I finally am watching base hits go up the middle, which I just haven't seen in years of like, that solid ball that would go right between the second baseman and shortstop or just to the like right of the second baseman because they're in the wrong shift. And a shift was right there and didn't matter. Like that ball was just going to get easily picked up by the second baseman or the shortstop. And it wasn't it looked like solid hit out of the batter's box. So I think it's making the small ball game digestible and more fun while keeping the analytics people at bay, where, I think a lot of them are more geared towards the shift and geared towards, taking away advantages as much as possible. So,
yeah. Well, I think that one thing you mentioned there is it used to be easily picked up. There's still been balls in the hole. There's still been balls up the middle that have been fielded and there's been outs made. But we've seen an athletic play by a shortstop or by a second baseman or a third baseman in the hole. Like he has to have more range on the left side of the diamond now. And stuff like that, I think, has been fun. We've seen BABIP, batting average on balls in play, has been up league wide since the beginning of spring training, following a year in which offense was at near historical lows pretty much everywhere. We've seen a bunch of runs scored, even in games where there's been cold weather in Chicago and St. Louis and in New York in opening weekend. We've seen a lot of runs put on the board. I think it's been a good product. As someone who was a little bit unsure of what to make of the pitch clock has been great. My biggest worry with that was we were going to see a lot of penalizations. And because the awarding of a ball or a strike can so drastically change the probabilities of getting a hit or getting on base or getting a strikeout, I was nervous for that. I didn't want at bats to be decided because a pitch didn't get off in time. I didn't want an inning to end because a batter wasn't focused at 8 seconds left on the clock. I think umpires have done a relatively good job letting these guys play. If things have been close, they haven't been crazy about enforcing it. The pitchers seem to be well ahead of pace. A lot of the broadcasts will put the pitch clock on when it gets to like 6, 7, 8 seconds. And most pitches are being thrown with about 4 seconds left on the timer. It doesn't even look like a lot of people are willing to push that. So that's been almost a non-factor for me. If anything, I feel like the pitchers like it because they're not out there thinking about everything a lot. There's like when you have a minute to throw a pitch, it's very easy to get frustrated because I didn't get that call in the corner on the last pitch. You start to get in your head a little bit. You overthink the game plan. Now you get that ball back. You just have to go.
You just got to throw. Yeah,
100%. You have to. And we've seen Ohtani, Dylan Cease, a couple of other guys calling their own games via PitchCom, which is a new thing. Typically, games would be called from the dugout, from the catcher, really anywhere but the pitcher, even though they might have had pregame meetings where the pitcher was involved, but signs in games are coming from the catcher. And now we're seeing pitchers take a little bit more control of that area of the game as well. So overall, I think it's been great. The bigger bases, though, I think far and away are the biggest takeaway from opening week. It's been incredibly exciting to watch all of these guys league wide running at will, seeing that become an integral part of the game. It's making every pitch exciting in a way that we just haven't seen in the last 5, 7, 10 years.
Oh yeah, 100%. And we, let's dive right into that. So we can talk about stolen bases. So significant stat, right? The most stolen bases on an opening day since 1906. That's huge. That's back to Honus Wagner, for our Pittsburgh fans watching. That's back to Honus Wagner days of stealing the base, where essentially it was significantly easy to basically get running on the base paths. I've loved it watching the stolen bases. I think as a capper and getting into the space, it's got to go away at some point, don't you think? It's getting to the point where every time I have a Baltimore game, like you might as well not even put up a prop for Mateo and Mullins, because every game, if it's plus 500, I'm betting that one of them is going to get on base and one of them is going to steal a bag.
Well, we've already seen.
I'll just bet both.
Yeah, well, we've already seen on Sunday Mullins got dropped at plus 160, so we're not getting plus 300 on Mullins anymore. And a MLB Dream, who did the Orioles preseason preview with us on this channel, is he is of the mindset that we're going to start to see two-way markets on stolen bases, meaning that you could bet yes, a player will steal a base, or no, a player will not steal a base at roughly even money, which could be a very interesting way to attack as well, because that really will open up the market to, I mean, you won't be able to cash as easy on these guys running wild, but there will be a lot of opportunity parlay pieces on guys that really don't steal bases often. There will be opportunities if there's a catcher that has a really strong pop time where maybe Mullins won't have a green light necessarily. I think it's going to be very interesting. More than anything, I think it'll be very fun from a betting perspective to see where the stolen base markets go throughout the course of the season.
Well, not just that. I think for the game, this is going to be awesome. So, talking to some guys who are like in their mid 30s to early 40s, they remember like the McGuire, Sammy Sosa, Barry Bonds days, like especially in 98 when you had McGuire and Sosa going up against each other for like the home run race, like who's going to beat the home run record. I legitimately think watching this season, like it will turn into conversations like around the water cooler kind of thing or on Zoom calls about, did you see who's leading the league right now in stolen bases? Like the guys who I'm seeing leading the league, like Acuna is not a top base stealer right now, but he should be. Like every time he's on base, like he was on base today, and I almost he got to second base on a pass catcher. But you know, you got guys like Volpe for the Yankees, Mateo and Mullins for Baltimore. McCormick is, you know, second right now. He's at 3 stolen bases. Corbin Carroll, you know, he's got, you know, coming out of Arizona. You get all these guys who are really killing it when it comes to all these stolen base aspect of the game that we just haven't seen before. So I really wouldn't be shocked if the MLB has unlocked something that is going to be in a conversation of everyday people. Like it's going to be exciting to talk about. Like we haven't had a guy to the likes of stealing over 100 plus bases since Ricky Henderson, and that was like 20 years ago. So I would love to see this be a huge aspect of the game where it's fun. It's just like really fun. Like all the leadoff guys are these awesome ball clubs, and you know games are getting decided because in the 8th inning, the Dave Roberts of the world who can get on base and steal a base for the Red Sox in a key game to win it. We're going to see that again. And I think that's huge. And it's really awesome for the game. So I'm happy about it.
Me too. It's been fun. As much as I hate the Yankees, it's been fun watching Anthony Volpe and some of those guys make an impact. What else? Takeaways from around the league. I know we're only 3-4 games into 162, and there's going to be a lot of overreactions. There's going to be a lot of polar emotional thoughts in response to the first couple of days of the season, which are obviously not usually going to age well. But what are the thoughts do you have from the first couple of days?
Average time of game going down, like I kind of talked about in my entry, right? So average, all according to New York Times, where I pulled these stats, 3 hours and 6 minutes, right? That's how long an average game was in 2022. Right now, it's sitting at 2 hours and 45 minutes. And the fastest game was Guardians Seattle, and they're tied with another game, which I don't remember where those two teams, but 2 hours and 14 minutes. So games are now becoming more digestible, and you know you're not dealing with those guys who take a solid like 45 seconds to do their gloves. You know, like pitchers are trying to get an upper hand, so they're faster into their sets. The pace of game, I just think, is getting significantly better. I think the pitch clock was huge. And I like it. I really do. And I love that fans are getting into it, because that's going to be an added aspect of the game that we haven't really seen before. JT Realmuto talked about it the other night when the Rangers games. He's like, I've never played in a ball game kind of that nature where it felt truly like everyone was against you and the clock is already kind of in your mind. But when you have a fan base that's literally screaming 8, 7, 6 to a pitcher, pitchers have never gone through that. In the history of the game, they've never gone through that. So that's going to be awesome, I think. And I think that's a side effect. I don't think the MLB planned on that at all. But like you're gonna have kind of like in football, like you're gonna have like a fan base that's gonna play an extra part, be like that 12 man kind of deal.
Or
And we might see
basketball,
it.
like we've seen it with Giannis in the playoffs a couple times, where like people don't know there's a timer for shooting free throws, and certain arenas get wind of that, and Giannis is known to read a book before he shoots his free throws, and fans playing around with that a little bit, or chanting the wrong number, trying to throw Giannis off and rush him, stuff like that. So I think absolutely will be interesting stuff to follow. My big takeaway is the American League. The American League East is going to be an absolute gauntlet once again. I know you were not super high on your New York Yankees heading into the season, but if Anthony Volpe is going to play the way he did, if Giancarlo Stanton is just going to be able to be in the lineup and he's going to be able to take advantage of pitches in the strike zone, that's going to be a huge plus for the Yankees. Aaron Judge, at least through the first weekend of action, there is no 62 home run season hangover. There's no contract hangover. Played really well. He made a hell of a play in center field defensively the other day. The Baltimore Orioles are going to be able to score a ton of runs. The pitching staff, a little bit suspect. I think we'll see. Their pitching staff, I think, is very well curated to pitch within the confines of Camden Yards. Pitching at places like Fenway, going to the Bronx, going other places on the road that are more hitter-friendly. I think the Cole Irvins and the Kyle Gibsons and the Dean Crummers of the world could run into some issues. But Baltimore is going to score a ton of runs. The Red Sox probably are going to score a bunch of runs. They're going to make a bunch of errors and not play very well defensively. They're not going to pitch well. So I think those two teams are a little bit in the same boat. Baltimore probably has more upside. But then Tampa, Toronto, and New York, those are three teams that are going to be at each other's throats. Probably at 95 wins, if not more, to win that division.
Right. Yeah. The AL East is playing out exactly how I thought it was going to. Like, these early games are going to matter, and it's going to be really significant. And I think it's kind of was underplayed. The Yankees, thank God, Giancarlo Stanton isn't falling all over himself to begin the season. He's really an interesting case because he's really hated by a lot of Yankee fans, and then he's got like this devoted fan base to him on Twitter and on Instagram it's really interesting to watch the two Yankees kind of civil war about it.
Well, because it's really because have to sit there and watch him strike out and sit on the bench for 45 games out of the season, and Twitter's just like, oh my God, did you see that missile that he hit into the left field bleachers the other night? Giancarlo is so cool. I wish we had Giancarlo.
Yeah, and that's the thing. It's like this classic civil war. Someone mentioned, like, dude, his entire time as a Yankee, he has an 850 OPS, and someone mentioned, yeah, but for Miami, he had like a 950. So like, that's just like this constant civil war of whether or not you're a Giancarlo fan or not. But, teams like Baltimore, teams like Tampa, it's scary. It's really it's scary to watch a young team like Baltimore, where they have, again, Mateo and Mullins, who are able to steal bases like it's their job. Like, there will be a competition between the two of them, who will be like top of AL for stolen base champ. And then you got guys like Gunnar Henderson and then Rutschman and then Santander. I mean, it's a scary lineup. I think anyone who's like sleeping on Baltimore is doing so at their own peril. And then the books have been doing it a lot, by the way. We were talking about that earlier this week. Like, I had no clue why the Red Sox were so heavily favored against Baltimore, like on game lines. And I'm like, that's not right. Like, they're closer, and the games played out that way. Like, Boston may have won, but the games were closer than what the actual odds were placed on them were. So,
yeah, I mean, Boston took 2 out of 3, but they only outscored Baltimore by 4 runs in those 3 games. I was a little bit surprised myself. I do think Baltimore is going to struggle against left-handed pitching. So the fact that they got to Sale was a little bit surprising to me. Chris Sale mentioned that was probably the most embarrassed he's ever felt on a baseball field. Chris Cotillo, one of the Red Sox beat writers, had the news on that. But yeah, if Baltimore is going to continue to be underdogs again, pretty much all season, there's going to be a lot of opportunity there. If we're going to continue to get their first 5 team total for their runs at 1.5, they are for sure going to score runs. They might not win 90 games, but they are definitely going to score runs on a frequent basis. And the Mateo Mullins thing is going to be really interesting because Mateo knows that his primary value to the Orioles is his defense and his speed. And there are guys coming out of the Baltimore farm system that are going to be
Jackson
ready
Holiday.
to step into his role mid-season.
Yep.
If Mateo gives the organization any reason to do so. But if Mateo keeps stealing bases at this rate, and if he keeps playing defense the way he is, him and Mullins, I mean, like they could genuinely be on pace to steal 50 bases apiece. It's gonna be fun to watch.
Yeah, but like you said, Baltimore's got Jackson Holiday right in the wind. So like Mateo probably has a picture of Jackson Holiday sitting in
not
his,
Holiday,
his
not
bedroom.
Holiday. Well, not Holiday. Like Baltimore has other middle infield prospects that are going to be major league ready within the next few months. And
no, but I will say Holiday, I understand that he was just drafted, but a lot of people in the Baltimore farm system are really high. And if Holiday comes out and is just smoking the minor leagues, I wouldn't be shocked if they considered bringing him up faster.
I would be shocked. I would be floored if we saw Jackson Holiday in the major leagues this year. Floored.
We'll see. We'll see. I mean, so the Baltimore team, but then also watching Toronto play against St. Louis and what they went through, like talk about Varsho being huge for them. I mean, you just saw so many things like play out for these AL East teams. Like everything went right that each team needed to go right. Like Volpe needed to work for the Yankees, and he did. Varsho needed to work for Toronto to get a different kind of bat into that lineup to be a game changer, and it played out when he was huge in that game in St. Louis on opening day. I watched that game I had St. Louis that day, but it was heartbreaking. But Varsho did exactly what Toronto needs him to do, to kind of be like that another intimidating bat smacked him in the middle of their lineup that's not just a righty but a lefty with some power. Varsho has worked for Toronto. The other one is Tampa with Wander Franco playing exactly how they need Franco to play. So each team has really had a player stand out. Like if this guy works, it's going to make them competitive. And we saw all those guys do well. So it was very interesting to watch. Even Gleyber Day for the Yankees, another big one, who played some very key factors in these last couple of games. A lot of trade rumors around him. And if they're shopping,
the Yankees got to stop this. They got to stop with the Gleyber.
It's true though, right? Trade. But it's because he was just a top prospect. Like he's got the top prospect pedigree.
Yeah, but still. Be happy that you have Gleyber Torres on your team. This is so irritating. That Yankees fans constantly want to trade this guy.
Yeah. I'm totally on that camp. Like the idea of rushing the prospects to come in to replace Torres when Torres is actually putting up stats as a second baseman that's actually pretty great for the position.
Oh yeah, and way better than league average at that position.
It's frustrating, right? Because like any other team would be happy, I think, to have the production that Gleyber Day produces at second base, and it's truly a Yankee sin of like, oh, he was like for 2 years he was the best guy in the league. This is going to be our perennial all-star, perennial MVP candidate, and then he stunk and got injured. And now everyone's basically like, oh, screw Gleyber Torres. Let's just throw him in any trade possible, right? To try to get this other guy from this other team. And it's like, why can't we just enjoy him playing second base? Because Oswaldo's he's not there. So let's keep going. So yeah, I love watching the AL East. To sum it up, these last couple of days.
I agree with you. My one team this week that I want to highlight is the Tampa Bay Rays. We talked about it in the preseason preview that was going to be my largest investment preseason was the over 88 wins on the Tampa Bay Rays. I know they play the Detroit Tigers. I know the Detroit Tigers are not going to impress anyone this season, but Tampa Bay should be absolutely thrilled with what they saw from Shane McClanahan, Zach Eflin, and Jeffrey Springs. We started celebrating Jeffrey Springs Day last May. Jeffrey Springs came out on Sunday and was downright filthy. It is incredible the progression that we have seen from Springs, even from last year when we were high on him to where he's at now. Zach Eflin, his curveball over 20% usage in his first start. We talked about that in the offseason as well, anticipating that Tampa was going to encourage him to throw that pitch more. It's been one of his better pitches throughout his career. And then his changeup is one of the most unique changeups in the game based on what we saw against the Tigers. It's spinning in a way that makes it look like it's a four seam coming in. So hitters are swinging at the pitch too early. It's not really moving. Like, I mean, we see what's the pitching ninja on Twitter and we see these crazy movement, the crazy movement on these pitches from different guys around the league. Eflin's not generating a ton of movement on that pitch, but he's throwing hitters' timing off in ways that is absolutely incredible. And again, I know the Detroit Tigers will need to see him do it against better offenses going forward. But what they saw from their front three in the rotation, which by the way does not include Tyler Glass now, who's arguably their co-ace, and we have Drew Rasmussen, who still has not pitched this season either. Tampa Bay, their pitching was fantastic. Their offense, Wander Franco, you just mentioned, great. Randy Arozarena looks locked in, focused to start the season. Other guys like Jose Siri look great. Brandon Lau, I know, got a little banged up this weekend, but the approach at the plate looks significantly better than it did last season. And I mean, it showed. They scored 21 runs in 3 games against the Tigers. You could not have played better baseball even against a bad team. The Atlanta Braves lost a game to Washington this past weekend. Tampa Bay didn't. They had no bumps in the road. I'm very, very impressed with them.
Yeah, so we talk about teams that you want to talk about. So mine is Detroit on the downside, right? And kind of pee in the Cheerios of Detroit fans. There was nothing to like about Detroit's offense over these last couple days. The amount of strikeouts that this team put up from both their highly touted prospects in, Spencer Torkelson only got 11 at-bats, struck out twice. Riley Green, 11 at-bats, struck out 4 times. Even their vets, Javier Baez, 10 at-bats, struck out 3 times. I mean, these guys, John Scope, 4 strikeouts. 4 at-bats. It's sad, man. This Detroit team, you pay all that money for Javier Baez. I mean, he would swing at anything that just is pitched to him in any kind of general direction.
Which is what happened last year, too. Guys, of anyone that had at least 400 plate appearances last year, Javi Baez swung at more pitches outside of the strike zone than any other player in the league. You can't get paid the amount of money he's getting paid and have that type of approach at the dish.
Yeah, the only thing I guess that you can like if you're Detroit, did Austin Meadows play pretty well? Yeah, okay, cool. like he was hurt, so the fact that he's coming back and in his first 3 games and 10 at bats, 4 hits, 1 double, an RBI. I think that's good. We have our research up respectfully, right? So it's just always nice to keep Detroit stats as they go along. And there's nothing to like about this lineup. And they went up against a really tough team in Tampa, and I get it. Like I get that the Tampa Bay Rays, that's a really tall order, but we have them going to play Houston now tomorrow. There's no reason for me to believe that they're going to pick up a game against Houston. Like Houston might do another sweep. Like Detroit might really end up being 0-6, 0-7 to start the year. So I would be really concerned if I were a Detroit fan. I would maybe start mailing it in as this is the Miguel Cabrera send-off year, and let's just enjoy him going to different ballparks and getting honors from people and some high fives. But there's nothing – I don't have like a silver lining, I think, for Detroit fans. And
they shouldn't, right?
The reason why I think it's impactful is –
I mean, I'm just saying, like, this was a team that not last year but the year before finished the year really strong, and they were thought of as a team that might be able to contend in the American League Central, especially with Green and Torkelson and Casey Mize and Tarek Skubal coming up. And not only did they fall on their face last year, the lineup that they've run out the first few days of this season is arguably much worse than what they put out there last year. So if you're Detroit, when is the next era going to arrive?
Yeah, I don't think anytime soon, honestly, because and you know where it's really impactful? It's because the team that I was most positive about, that I actually put a couple of plays on and was successful with, was Minnesota. Like Minnesota came out and they did great against the Kansas City Royals. Pablo Lopez had an awesome start. Seems like, again, a lot of people were like, why is Pablo Lopez getting the ball? It's his first, like, is Sonny Gray or someone who's more like established with the Minnesota franchise for the last like year or two get the ball on opening day. They gave it to Pablo and did great. Pulled out a 2-0 win. They don't have a fourth game, I believe, against Kansas City. So I think they just swept Kansas City in Kansas City. And I have no reason to believe that they won't be a legitimate threat. Buxton played beautifully. And if Buxton is healthy, watch out. Like, sleeper for MVP caliber racing. I mean, this guy, I watched him play today because I had a play on them yesterday. I had a play on them to win -1, and they came through for me. And it was off the bat of guys like Carlos Correa out of Buxton and Mr. Joey Gallo hitting 2 home runs, and and the resurrecting they're trying to do for his career. I really like Minnesota as well coming out of the Central. So I guess two major teams coming out of the Central in this last week that I've really enjoyed watching. One, because I think it's funny in Detroit, and all the Detroit fans that I know personally who've been telling me that they've been on the up and up for the last 3 years. And then actually watching a team in Minnesota that will make the race for the AL Central pretty crazy. I think the games between like Guardians and Minnesota are going to be really, really big.
Yeah, I think either one of those teams has a very viable chance to win that division. I will say you're picking on Detroit. You're projecting them for an 0-6 start. I wasn't impressed with Houston at all this past weekend. I know Houston's been to, 6 straight American League Championship Series. They've won a couple. They've been there to the Fall Classic, I believe, 4 times in that stretch.
I mean, they're World Series champs, brother. They're the defending champs.
I mean, they are, but you look at what's on that roster this year. It's not Jose Altuve to start the season. It's not Michael Brantley to start the season. They don't have Lance McCullers Jr. to start the season, which is honestly just becoming a perpetual issue for them. They don't have Justin Verlander. They don't have Garrett Cole at the front of that rotation. They're relying on guys who, quite frankly, are not aces in that rotation. The offense, after you get past Tucker, Alvarez, and Abreu at the top of the order, there's really not a lot to like. And frankly, there's a lot to dislike in that line.
Yeah, I get that, but I've watched Jeremy Pena actually have a couple really good games, and if
he can hit fastballs, he can hit. But even if you include Pena in that, that's still 5 spots in the lineup that are far from intimidating presences. And you look at their zone contact rates from the weekend, and again, it's one weekend that we know all too well from consuming baseball content, from being baseball fans, from betting on baseball, that 5-day sample sizes, 3-day sample sizes don't mean much. But it is notable that for an organization like the Houston Astros that has made a killing across the last decade-ish on swinging at good pitches and not swinging at bad pitches, hitting fastballs really well, not chasing out of the zone, that they have a good 4 or 5 guys in their lineup right now on a daily basis that have just been downright awful in terms of their approach. Every single player on the White Sox, Lynn, Cease, who was it? Giolito and Mike Clevenger all hit the over on their K-props opening weekend. Yeah. Mike Clevenger, I think, had 8 strikeouts on Sunday.
And not only that, it was also it was sad to watch Giolito pitch in a way that people are going to continue to bring him up as if he's one of the best pitchers in baseball. It was kind of sad to see that. What I'll say for Houston is do we really expect Alex Bregman to be this cold? I mean, the guy hasn't even gotten a hit yet in this whole first series. So I know you mentioned okay, but when you get past Alvarez, Tucker, and Abreu, who's there? And I understand, but I think
even throw Bregman. There are 4 guys undeniably.
Throw Bregman and I think be fair. Throw Bregman and Jeremy Pena in there.
Fine, but 5 guys. The bottom half of that lineup, the point still stands of that lineup is not impressive in the bottom half. And if Bregman, Pena, any of those guys aren't producing, that lineup is not a threat to anyone.
I get that. I would not be shocked if they have a bounce back series against a weak Detroit team. Bregman gets back and gets into at least some kind of form, right? When you have a division where you have Oakland, the volatility of the Angels, you can afford to lose a couple of games, I think, at the beginning of the season, right? Or until you get Altuve. I think Altuve, when they lost Altuve, was huge. And I do think that the loss of Altuve does open them up if it's going to be a longer kind of deal where it's, maybe it's not. Maybe they're kind of even downplaying his injury right now. Let's say it's actually longer than expected. Then I'm not necessarily ready to basically crown them as division champs when you actually have Texas, who, for all purposes, Texas look pretty great. and against a pretty solid team in Philadelphia, at least coming off of last season. I mean, World Series runner-ups. And then on top of that, you just have a team in Seattle, which I've been watching all the Seattle Cleveland games. It has been like a playoff series, like watching the intensity of these games between these two teams. And even though Seattle didn't come up top in the series, they still played electric. I think some of the things that we talked about in our previews was kind of interesting, like Teoscar Hernandez poorly on defense actually played out in some of the games. Like I watched literally guys.
Another great example of we need 162 games, right?
Yep. Like, so I'm not ready to rule out Houston, but I can definitely see the concerns, and especially rolling up against the Chicago squad, which really underperformed last season. I will say this. I think there's a different philosophy in the Chicago White Sox clubhouse about small ball, because I had this written down. Currently, there are top three. They're tied with New York Yankees in stolen bases at the beginning of the season. Last year, they were ranked number 24 in stolen bases. So that could be like an old school approach. Now that they have a new head coach, they're going to use some of the speed that they have on the base paths. So, like Tim Anderson, they're going to unlock him a little bit and let him fly, right? So I think Chicago will be interesting. And Houston might have just had a really rough opponent just going into their opening week, and we'll see how it plays out against Detroit. If they drop a couple games to Detroit, then we'll be like, okay, what's happening? Or what the hell is happening in Houston? But I'm not ready.
If anyone loses to Detroit, we're going to be like, what the hell's happening?
Yeah, what's going on? Like, you're lazy. Like, you're just lazy if you're losing to Detroit.
But you mentioned Seattle. Let's talk about a couple injuries around the league. And honestly, a lot of the notable injuries are in that American League West. Houston doesn't have Altuve, doesn't have Brantley, doesn't have McCullers Jr., which we already mentioned. Max Fried left his first start on opening day with a hamstring injury. Doesn't look like it's going to be too severe. And then probably the biggest injury news of the week was Justin Verlander ended up on the injury list with a lat strain, and then Robbie Ray was the other one with the flexor strain. So he'll be out probably, it sounds like, a month or longer. So what do you make of these injuries? Are there any injuries in particular that you think are going to have significant impacts on their team?
Yeah, I think Fried is huge because Kyle Wright's also starting off on the IL. So, we talked about that in our preview of, Wright was someone that we really liked going into the season, maybe breakout candidate. He's still on the injured list. And now that you have Fried going there too, now we're talking about a Spencer Strider, who I said I was concerned that he was a 2-pitch guy and had to develop that third pitch. He's thrown that changeup in his last start actually pretty well. So I'm hoping that that's consistent, but it's still a concern. And now you have to rely on a guy like Charlie Morton. And he's no longer just an accessory piece that's pretty great for the team to have as that fourth guy. Now he's all of a sudden turning into your arguably second or third guy. So, and the rookie today or yesterday, I keep saying today, I apologize. The rookie yesterday got shelled by a terrible Washington Nationals team. So, I'm a little concerned for the Braves to start out, but it's okay because their main rival, at least who I consider their main rival in the New York Mets, lose Verlander, lose Quintana, lost Edwin Diaz. Like, it sounds like the boogeyman injury scenario that I played out for you in our preview is slowly coming to fruition in these first couple of days. And
I disagree.
I don't wish it on the Mets, but it is concerning to already see Verlander go to the IL. And I know you talked about this already. You kind of were like, you listen, like we budgeted this essentially for the Mets. So I hope that's true. But I think the most significant injury, though, is not a Mets injury. It's really Fried's injury. It's the Braves. They're going to have to put a lot of runs up on the board to make up for rookie pitching and relying on veterans who, going into the season, you're like, oh, we don't have to be super reliant on these guys. And now we also have to.
Yeah, I think that's a bigger loss than people realize at the top of that rotation.
Yeah.
Strider was great against the Washington Nationals, but again, the Nationals are probably the worst team in the league, almost definitely the worst team in the league. And losing Fried going into a portion of their schedule where it's not a cakewalk for them. Looking at what they have coming up next here, if
St. Louis next.
Like let's say Fried misses the next, let's just say 2 or 3 weeks. He could potentially miss a start against the Cardinals / Padres, the Reds and the Royals, should be fine in there. But then the Padres and then the Astros, if I'm wrong about the Astros and there's not as many reasons to be concerned about them, and maybe I am overreacting, it's not the easiest start to the season, this first 25-ish days here.
No.
And hopefully,
and even Miami's not a cakewalk at all.
Correct. Like they just, like they're an improved team, bringing in a rise. The offense is a little bit better. They can put the ball in play a little bit more. Hopefully he's back.
Well, they did it against New York, right?
Yeah.
I mean, like the New York series was competitive the entire time. I watched all those games this week very closely as well because I was capping a lot of those games. And Miami played pretty well. Like there wasn't a game where I was like, oh, Miami's just out of this. So that's going to be huge.
That's what I mean. So hopefully Fried is back within a month. Hopefully he's back at least by the time this New York series comes around, because I know it's a cliche, but these games all do count the same as the ones that take place in August and September. So I think that could be a notable loss, especially like we talked about in the preseason. Charlie Morton, his role on this team was supposed to be more of an innings eater. He goes out there on the every fifth day and he gets you through 5 and gives the offense a chance to win. But now if Morton has all of a sudden become the second best pitcher on the staff, the Braves don't have the same starting pitching depth that the Mets have. And that's what I talked about in the preseason is, like Quintana's going to go down. Scherzer's going to go down at some point. Verlander already went down. But when those guys go down, you hand the ball to David Peterson, you hand it to Tyler McGill, you hand it to guys who Joey Lucchesi potentially could get a start here. You hand the ball to guys who have proven they can get outs on a consistent basis at the major league level. They are not starting for another major league team because they've had injury concerns. They've had time through the order concerns where they can't get through lineups twice or 3 times on a consistent basis. But the Mets are not completely screwed if they miss a couple of starts from Verlander or a couple of starts from Scherzer. And Quintana, it sounds like he has some relatively serious health issues going on. So I wish him nothing but the best. But Quintana should be afforded all the time in the world to get back and be healthy if he's able to pitch this year, because David Peterson is more than serviceable and McGill's more than serviceable. You would love to have an upgrade there. You would love to have Quintana at that part of the rotation, but they'll be fine. And frankly, I know a lot of people don't think the Mets have a great offense. I don't want to face Pete Alonso, Frankie Lindor, Jeff McNeil, Brandon Nimmo, Mark Canha, Starling Marte. I don't understand why everybody's so down on the Mets, why everybody's just penciling the Braves and is like, of course they're going to win this division. I don't think it's that cut and dry.
No, I that Mets lineup, when you just rattle off those names, just terrifying.
And those are top of mind names. Like that, those are top of mind. Like
right.
I think the reason people don't think the Mets have a good offense is because Brandon Nimmo is not a sexy name. Brandon Nimmo's not going to hit 40 home runs. He's like, you don't have Ronald Acuna at the top of that lineup, but you have a guy that gets on base at roughly a similar clip.
Same with Escobar, right? Eduardo Escobar. I mean, same thing. So I get you.
Tommy Pham coming in on days when you're seeing a lefty. So like they have enough depth on that roster to weather 162 games. And I think that's something that a lot of people don't account for in their preseason analysis of teams. Is you're not gonna have all 26 guys for all 162 games. You need a 40-man roster, and you might need even more than 40 guys to get through a whole season. And the Mets are more well-positioned for that attrition than any other team in the league, in my opinion.
Completely agree. I mean, they are very deep, and it's very hard to argue against that. So I still think, Fried is the most impactful injury. For you, we can transition into our next topic off kind of like the back of this point, talking about the loss of injuries. Was there a player that really stuck out, like whoa, kind of that one of those moments where you're like, maybe we didn't talk about this guy enough, or a validation, like we talked about this guy to death and he came out and proved it in the first couple of days? Was there anybody you have on your radar like that?
Yeah, Sosa mentioned it yesterday in Sunday Night Spaces. We asked him for his key takeaways from the week, and I am in full agreement with him. It's Wander Franco. He was the guy. He came up before Julio. He signed an 11-year deal, almost $200 million, with an organization that never commits any significant amount of time or money to anyone. Wander was supposed to be the guy in Tampa, and then last year missed half the season with a variety of different injuries. And then Julio Rodriguez came in, as Sosa mentioned, and stole the show, became the new face of baseball when we're talking about young guys. But Wander looked really, really good this weekend. He's stealing bases. He's playing great defense. He's hitting the crap out of the baseball. And Wander, people don't realize too, he was hurt last year, suffered a hand injury. And typically when guys suffer hand injuries mid-season, it completely saps their power for the rest of the year. They see their contact rates plummet. Some guys start pressing, and then you see their zone contact rates fall apart. Wander came back last year after a hamate injury, hit over 300, had an OPS over 800 across his last 97 plate appearances. He has picked up right where he left off. I know there was a little bit of an injury scare at the end of spring training there, but he is incredible and is someone that I think we're going to be talking about a lot this season. I mean, he might even start to get his way into the national media. I know he plays in Tampa, but it's going to be hard to ignore what this guy does on a baseball field if he keeps playing the way he did this weekend.
Yeah, I can speak from my baseball card flipping experience, which I'll be talking about sometimes going into this season. I'm finally resurrecting that. There was no more valuable card, I'll tell you, Commish, than first Bowman Chrome rookie signed Wander Franco card 3 years ago. And it was exactly like you're talking about, just the hype that was coming behind this guy's name in the baseball card flipping. I'll talk about it more on a show that I'll be doing, but it's about kind of like investing like in guys like the stock market, essentially. Like, who do we buy at a very young age and then kind of get up into the majors, and therefore it justifies your incredible investment. Like Joey Bart was another guy that was big a couple of years ago, and obviously that hasn't panned out. It's nice to see that Wander Franco is actually living up to the hype. It makes me believe in the industry a little. This guy is electric. I'm going to keep in the AL East for my guy, who is, I think, just as electric and will be incredibly necessary for this team to compete. It's going to be Adley Rutschman for Baltimore. He has come as advertised, a guy who I think is going to resurrect Baltimore baseball, make it exciting again, make the ownership start investing in the team again. Opening day was so much fun to watch Adley Rutschman in Fenway Park, keeping that team alive the entire game. Went 5 for 6, home run in his first at bat, 4 RBIs. I mean, the guy was electric. He was fun. He's going to resurrect a very important fan base, I think, in baseball. It's been lying dormant in Baltimore for the last couple of years. And if Baltimore's going to be the team that I think they're going to be, that young, exciting, take games away from the Yankees, take games away from Tampa, right, to actually be a thorn in the side, maybe make a wild card run, it's going to be on the back of this guy. And he plays baseball in such a fun way. He doesn't play it like a catcher where it's like he makes a guest appearance. Catchers have been rarely some of the best bats on a team in the last couple of years, and I think he's a throwback to that, like the Joe Mauer Twins days. I think this is a guy who every year, if he plays enough games, can be in that MVP discussion. He's electric also behind the plate, not just in front. So this is my guy. I think he was the most fun to watch, and it really is off the back of that opening day. He struggled yesterday. He had a hit a couple days ago, and then he just went off on opening day just to open up the season. But I think that's why it's important. Like, if you were a Baltimore fan or a young Baltimore fan and you were watching opening day in Fenway Park, where for the last couple of years you've just gotten your ass handed to you from that team and just around the AL East, and to watch this guy go up and just basically put up a major middle finger to the established narrative, this is your dude. And I think that's also Wander, by the way, for Tampa. So I think they're very much like compatible in this conversation, but this is the guy for Baltimore.
No arguments here. And I think defensively as well, you can see on the screen, this is from last year, but 79th percentile in pop time, also an excellent framer, 84th percentile last year. So this is a guy that can get it done at the plate and also defensively. Could not agree more. I think the American League East has a ton of young budding talent that makes that division so much fun to talk about with Vladdy, with Bo Bichette, with Rutschman, Gunnar Henderson, all the guys that are going to be coming up for Baltimore, Wander Franco, yep. Tampa Bay, Taj Bradley, some of those other guys coming up as well. So that division is going to be a lot of fun to talk about for a long time. And now that pre-arbitration deals are becoming, or pre-arbitration extensions are becoming more of a common thing, I really hope that we get to see these guys in the same division, in the same uniform for the better part of a decade, if not longer. I think that'll make for great entertainment and a lot of competitive baseball.
And also great for the game. Like when you have ESPN start hearing like, oh, wait, we can put Toronto and an Orioles game on primetime TV and build personalities around these players. Like it's just
Correct.
good for the marketing of the game and just making it more exciting. So anytime that a market like a Baltimore, which is a huge financial market, all of a sudden comes back into the forefront, it's just great for baseball. Right. And they don't have like the evil empire reputation of the Yankees where everyone's going to hate on them. It'll be more like not only is this great financially, but also they're loved. It's the same kind of conversation with Seattle, right? Great market. On top of that, America's going to love this team. So I'm excited. I'm excited to watch all these guys.
They'll be the Cubs. Everybody rooted for the Cubs in 2016.
Yeah, in 2016.
And then they got
that's only because so much.
Yeah. So, but Gio, so let's get out here in a minute. But before we go, for people that are unaware, you are brand new to betting. This is your first few days in the betting space, making this a part of your daily habits. I've been doing this for a little bit longer, last about 5 years. I want to know what your impressions were the last few days, and then I guess on a weekly basis, if we have you on the show consistently, I want to know what lessons you've learned, things that you ran into, because people are at all points of their betting journey. Some people are brand new, just like you are. Some people have been around for a little bit. I think the one commonality is I can learn from you. You can learn from me. You and I can learn from people in the comments and in the community. I think the more information that we share and the more open and honest we are about, I can't believe I did that. I can't believe I pissed away X amount of money on this bet or in this market that was so dumb. I think the more we can do that, the more information we can share with people, the better off we're going to be. So on that note, what did you make the first few days of different markets? What were you attacking? What lessons that you learned? Anything along those lines?
Sure. So what I can basically say from it is drastically different from being a fan of the game of baseball and thinking, oh yeah, of course the Yankees are going to pull this off, than strategically looking into each game to try to find value as a handicapper. And I think it's very evident from the plays that I did, markets I tried to dive into and got burned, and then some things that I feel like my fandom played a little bit of a part in, but also just really doing the work and diving into the research, right? So I got reamed the other day on walk props. And, one of the questions I had was I've followed a lot of cappers and like the strikeout props is a huge thing. How come I don't see enough guys go after walk props? And I still think that there might be potential there. And I learned some things I think more about when getting into capping. It's just learning what are the stats that mean something and what are the stats that don't mean anything at all. Like just throw it out when you're trying to actually look at something. So when I was doing
descriptive stats, but they don't have predictive validity if you're trying to make a wager.
Yeah, like you're looking at the back of a baseball card, what really defines the player, and what is just something that's just a result of their game. You know what I mean? It's like it doesn't define who they are exactly. It just plays it out through a whole season. So walk props, I had Giolito. I'm looking at one right now. Giolito over 1.5 walks, -130. Giolito walked one guy, right? His pitch count went pretty high multiple times during the game. There were multiple times where he was 3-2. Here's something that I did not look up enough: the umpires, and I should have, and it was dumb that I kind of glanced over it, but it was incredibly impactful. I don't think I've ever been more frustrated watching an MLB game than when I had a walk prop, because it's really dependent on who the umpire is. Like there were multiple times my walk prop should have cashed if the umpire didn't call a ball that was blatantly out of the strike zone as a strike, or vice versa, right? And it's like that.
One of the numbers, just to like jump in there, it's one of the things that I noticed very early in my betting career as well on the K prop market, to the point where I will not bet a K prop anymore unless there is at least a neutral umpire in the game, meaning that he's not K averse. Because umpires, like, you don't realize it until you start betting on this stuff. You don't realize it until you start watching ball and strike calls so closely. Umpires play a massive role in the game of baseball, especially from a betting perspective. So I'm with you. Like, whether it's walks or strikeouts, you have to know the umpire before you go in and make a wager there, unless the line is grossly mispriced to where you have significant margin for error that even an umpire could not derail that play for you.
Yeah. So like in another stat that I thought maybe had some validity in this process, but I quickly learned that it didn't. Walks per 9 innings. I think that stat, it means nothing when you're trying to evaluate a walk prop. I think the two stats that were actually pretty impactful, one on the pitching side, one on the offensive side, was whip. Like guys who basically like load up the bases and get a bunch of people on. So like yesterday I had a play on the Mets because it was more about fading Rogers than it was my faith in bats against lefties or against left-handed pitching with the Mets. Rogers did exactly what I thought was going to happen. His first inning, he threw like 30 or 40 pitches, and you could just see how rattled that he got and how easily he gets guys on base. So I think that was an important stat. On the offensive side, I should have used more of the outside the zone swing percentage, which means some of these plays I put out before even lineups came out because I was more going against the pitcher than I was caring on who the lineup was going to be. And sometimes the lineups came out, I'm like, okay, that validated. Oh my God, I can't say that word. That validated my play because I saw the lineup that came out and a bunch of guys are pretty disciplined guys. That was my Robbie Ray walk prop against the Guardians, right? That lineup came out perfect. Like Guardians are going to win that easily, first inning cash. But then I did the one on Justin Steele against Chicago and the Brewers lineup that they ushered out there. I just watched so many Brewers just swinging. Like I could feel the breeze from my seat at home. They were swinging so hard through at balls so drastically out of the strike zone. Justin Steele should have walked 4 guys that game, and I really lost it because of the Brewers offense. So just some things I learned, I think, on that prop side. I think there was a lot of value to be found in -1 games. So like if I'm confident enough that a team's going to like Minnesota against Kansas City, if I'm really confident the entire read has this game that I think that outright Minnesota is going to win this game, I think I'll be playing a lot of those -1 props a lot because if there's only a 1, then it pushes, right? It happened on
Margin
my
of
Pittsburgh
victory.
prop.
Yep. Like if they win by 1, then it's a push. But you don't have to. Like a lot of people, especially people that are new to capping, the default lines, they don't want to pay a lot of juice, which is understandable. But they take the 1.5, and the reality is teams don't try to win games by 2 runs. They would love to win games by 10 runs, but in reality, they try to win by 1. And a lot of times, baseball games do come down to the end. And I'm a huge fan of those as well. That's one thing that I got really big into last year. I used to play a lot of spreads, and I honestly like my success rate picking winners is incredibly high. My success rate picking teams to cover 1.5 spreads less high, unless it's like there are certain teams like the Dodgers last year. You could take the Dodgers to win by as many runs as you want, and the Dodgers got it done most nights. But we don't often see a team as talented as the Dodgers. The -1 covers you. You can also split your investment, a half on the money line, a half on the -1 spread. You could split it a half on the -1, a half on the -1.5 if you feel really confident. Like there's ways to do it where you're not paying a ton of juice if that's not your thing, or you're not constantly hoping a team's going to win by 2 runs, because it will feel like it is rigged against you because you'll be up 5-3 in the 9th inning of a game and there'll be a leadoff double, and the team that's up by 2 does not care at all about the guy on second base. There'll be a ground ball to the right side and then a fly ball. They win by 1 and the team is thrilled because they got a W, and then but you feel like you got screwed out of a bet even though it was a good read, which in reality it probably was a decent read and it just didn't come through with you. So I think that's a great lesson to pick up in just your first week of doing this.
Yeah, so like the Mets one was huge for me today, right? So like to win, I was very confident the Mets were going to win today. The Mets to like outright to win, I think was -160 or 170. Like they were a pretty heavy favorite to win against the Marlins going into yesterday's game, I should say. And the line at -1 was +105. So I was like, oh, well, everything tells me that this game is going to go the Mets way. So if they win by 1, I get my money back. Cool. If they win by more than 1, which I think is going to happen, then I get my plus money and I get the value that I thought was going to be there anyway. So I'll be playing a lot of those, I think, going into the future. If everything's spinning that way. I'm going to see if I can get that -1 at plus odds.
Good stuff. Good stuff. My one piece of advice, lesson learned this week. I cashed on the Brewers and the Cubs, the over 9 on Sunday, and this was just a play. We're at Wrigley, and the wind was blowing out pretty obnoxiously to left field. I've always known Wrigley Field is an older constructed stadium, which means that wind can play much more of a factor at Wrigley than it does at a lot of modern stadiums that have bigger scoreboards, where wind doesn't as easily have access to the playing surface. Wrigley, back in 2007, there was a guy in the Hardball Times documented 23% of fly balls that more than 23% of fly balls result in home runs at Wrigley when the wind is blowing out, compared to only about 13% of fly balls resulting in home runs when the wind is blowing in. Dug into this a little bit more to see if I could find some more effects on wind just to further refine this approach. Found an article at Roto Grinders from 2016 that basically said when the wind is blowing out towards left field, that is the most hitter-friendly wind that you could ever have in a game. So if you're capping, strong wind blowing out to left field, great chance we're going to see some offense. Logically, this makes sense. A lot of batters are right-handed, more so than left-handed. If the wind is blowing towards right field, even if it's substantial, not as impactful, because if a right-handed hitter pulls a ball in the air and the wind's blowing towards right field, that ball will actually have a higher chance of dying in the outfield than it will going over the wall. So winds out to left field, if there's a right-handed batter, a right-handed heavy lineup, very, very impactful. On Sunday, this was a success story that we're sharing. Lauer and Tyone, both high fly ball rate pitchers. They also don't strike out a lot of guys, so we expected a lot of balls in play. Of course, a few fly balls get up in the air, they get out of the park. Manifested, that play cashed in the 6th inning. So that was a nice read. Basic takeaway from that is pay attention to the weather reports. We already covered on this. Gio said pay attention to the umpires. Also pay attention to the weather. And my only other takeaway is Jack Flaherty is as broken as he was last year and the year before. His pitch sequencing was as predictable as it was the year before. We're talking about walk props, Gio. I don't play walk props, but I will tell you what I will absolutely be playing when Jack Flaherty comes around this week is the over 1.5 Jack Flaherty walks, because that guy is not going to make anyone miss. I mean, swing and miss outside of the strike zone. Toronto spit on everything that was even a little bit ambiguous, whether it was a ball or a strike. I think any semi-disciplined team that goes against Flaherty and the Cardinals, Flaherty's going to have a very, very difficult time keeping guys off base.
Yeah, the only let's enlighten for people at home, because you gave me this source, but where do you get your weather source? Just so people are like, hey, I'm going to check the weather report for a game real quick before I place this bet. What's your most reliable for that?
So I have a couple different sources that I cross-reference, but I use Swish Analytics. I use Roto Grinders. Kevin Roth is a great resource, and there's a couple other. I will put them in the link or in the description below, so people can check those out.
Yeah, do the description too for the umpires, because that's also huge.
Yep.
I now have that I'm going to be actively using, but I think that's a good source for people as well.
Will do. I think that is great. Well, anything else from you before we get out of here?
No, man, I'm good to go. I'm looking forward to the Yankees continuing their dominance and another good series for them. I appreciate everything that you do for me here. At NextGen Gio on my Twitter, at NextGen Gio on my Instagram for my plays, also for just some fun baseball content and some shows that we'll be doing in the future.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate you joining. Happy Brady Singer Day to everyone who will be betting on Monday. This is our first Brady Singer holiday of the year. We celebrated our first Jeffrey Springs holiday yesterday. Even more exciting, we get our fade Jose Barrios Day on the same day and in the same matchup as we get our Brady Singer holiday. So if you can put 2 and 2 together, I think you know where I'm going in that one. Really, really appreciate everyone's support, though. If you find the content valuable, please like, share, subscribe, all of that good stuff. Other than that, we got a big slate. Don't hesitate. Reach out with questions, comments, information that you find valuable that you think makes the game more enjoyable to watch. If it makes betting easier for you, or if you have an angle that makes sense, share it in the comments. Reach out to myself or Gio with any ideas, questions, anything like that in the DMs. Always open. Always happy to share some information with people. Until next time, this was our State of the Sandlot, and we'll be back doing this on a weekly basis, trying to bring you as much information as possible. Best of luck this week. Go enjoy the games. Very, very happy that baseball is back. See everyone.